what's going on with consumers. So tell us what you're seeing.
Actually, despite all of this thought that there was a recession coming, we don't see it. In fact, our fourth quarter numbers, which for us were September 30 numbers, were better than the third quarter. The U.S. was up 8%. The international was up 12%, excluding China. Europe was up 13% when you exclude the U.K., which has done a little bit of self-inflicted wound to themselves.
So what's wrong with everyone that we're talking so much about recession?
I think it must just be the cycle. It's been a long time that we've had this upswing, and I think that people just look at the history and say it's got to go down at some point. But, the consumer has stayed extremely strong around the world. The only place we see any weakness is in the UK. And as I said, that's kind of related to the whole Brexit situation. But other than that, the world looks pretty darn good.
What are they buying? Where's their money going?
In our world, there's a couple of things that are really driving the increases in the number of transactions we're seeing. One is obviously e-commerce. People are jumping on their phones and jumping on their iPads and jumping on their computers and buying in big ways. We're seeing every month those numbers, the growth in e-com is anywhere between 2 and 3 times the growth in the face-to-face world every single month. We're also seeing people continuing to travel. There was a real downturn in travel back in December and January. If you remember, that's during the height of the U.S.-China trade talks. It was during the height of the Brexit conversations. And then we had the 45-day U.S. government shutdown. And almost immediately, consumers started to just stay at home and not travel. But we've seen that pick up, especially in the last 6 months. And that's always a good sign that when people are willing to leave their home country and go to another country, that's a very, very good thing. The other thing that we're seeing is an increased amount of smaller ticket items being used using digital payments. And a lot of that, I think, is driven by mass transit.
I agree.
We are really excited about mass transit. Just in the last 90 days, we've seen open systems in Edinburgh and Sao Paulo. We started in June here in the MTA in New York, where we're only at 18 stations from Grand Central Station to Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. But by the end of October of 2020, the MTA hopes to be in all 424 subway stops.
Are people using it?
Absolutely.
It's the whole idea of tap and go, right?
Absolutely. It's tap and go. It's so convenient. It's better experience for the merchant. It's better experience for the consumer. We hit 1 million transactions in the first 7 weeks, and and that's at 18 stations. It's truly amazing. Absolutely continuing to grow. Tap to pay has grown hugely around the world, with the exception of the United States, interestingly enough.
What is it about the United States, which is usually pretty innovative in many ways and early adopting in terms of technologies? Why is the U.S. lagging?
The U.S. is lagging because it goes back, you have to go back about 6 or 7 years at least, where the U.S. was much slower to adapt chip in the card.
Right.
And it took so long to adopt chip. At that point in time, people around the rest of the world were moving past actually just dipping the card to actually tapping. And the reality is that the other countries have moved hugely ahead of us. You have countries like Poland and Hungary that are over 90% tap to pay in the face-to-face world. In the U.S., we have a very interesting situation. The vast majority of the businesses are set and plumbed to be able to facilitate tap to pay. It's replacing the hundreds and hundreds of millions of cards. And the banks, rightly so, want to do it on their normal cycle. So by the end of this year, we'll have over 100 million cards in the United States that will be tap to pay enabled, and by the end of next year, it'll be over 300 million. So this will take a little time.
Does the world eventually become China? We were at conversations, we constantly talk about it, it's in the magazine often, that basically you've got your phone in China and that's all you need. They don't want cash or any other kind of mode of payment. Is that where we move towards?
I don't think fully. The interesting thing about payments, and I've been in and around this industry for 3.5 decades now, it is an extraordinarily local business. It is driven by tradition. It's driven by laws. It's driven by history. So you look at some of the biggest economies in the world, Mexico, Germany, Japan, they're huge cash societies still till this day.
Right.
And they've been slow to adopt, and I think over time that adoption will pick up. But I think there's still, for a long period of time, going to be a place in the world for all kinds of different form factors, with certainly a card and a phone probably continuing to be the predominant one.
What's the biggest existential threat to your company or industry?
Well, I think cybersecurity, is always at the top of my list. The bad guys, unfortunately, have access to the same technology the good guys do. And when we look ahead over the next decade, you're going to have 5G really take off, Internet of Things take off, artificial intelligence and machine language getting to the next level, quantum computing perhaps starting to show up. And all of that technology is going to create enormous opportunity for value to be delivered to consumers, but it's also going to create potential risks to technology-based infrastructure companies like we are.